It really seems like critical thinking is extinct these days. All around us, people are falling deeper into division. TikTok conspiracy theories, Instagram comment wars, violent Twitter discourse, but nobody seems to be stopping to ask if what they believe is even true, let alone trying to find out. Today, I want to show you exactly how that happens through one person's story. Meet Billy here. He's not unique. He's the result of failing schools, echo chambers, and hardwired biases. Billy falls down an all too common spiral that lands him in a pretty nasty place. But it all could have been completely prevented. How? Well, after we see what happens to him, I'll show you all of the proven tools that we can use to make sure that you don't end up the same way. Billy grew up without ever being taught how to think critically. He went to an underfunded school that had very limited access to the internet and teachers that couldn't give him individual attention. He inherited the worldview of his family, he's funneled into biased media, and over time, the social media algorithms lock him deeper and deeper into an echo chamber. Without the tools to question everything, he doesn't just believe misinformation, he spreads it. With enough time and exposure, Billy falls down the all-too-common red pill path into an extremist worldview, and nothing otherwise can get through to him. Not because he's stupid, but because he's filled to the brim with natural cognitive bias, and nobody ever gave him the skills to think critically in the first place. Critical thinking didn't die in Billy. It was never there to begin with. Instead, Billy went 30 years of being reinforced with his cognitive biases before ever being challenged on his beliefs. So when we see it from this perspective, it makes perfect sense why Billy would slip into extremism and be impossible to sway. Billy's story is just one extreme example of what we're seeing in the world today. Not everybody falls into extremism, and this situation is not relegated to the rural American archetype. These things can happen in the left-wing spaces or in politically agnostic spaces. People inherently have biases based on their upbringing and gravitate to their respective echo chambers. It's only natural. Social media amplifies these echo chambers and the spread of misinformation and disinformation because there is no regulation, and then the mainstream media picks that up and perpetuates those cycles even further. People are constantly fed things that confirm these biases and are never given the skills to develop or even the desire to develop the skills to break these cycles. And honestly, it really isn't the individual's fault a lot of the time. Yes, there are absolutely arguments for large portions of the country that grew up in, good financial situations and had good educations and varied social demographics, but there's even highly educated teachers that don't fully agree on what critical thinking is. There are still the social conditions at play, and a person's social upbringing has just as much to do with whether or not they develop these skills as any other factor. Yes, being taught critical thinking skills as a kid and seeing different viewpoints at a young age is absolutely a recipe for a grounded individual. That's my story. I grew up poor and not in the best school system, but my parents did a really good job of pushing me to think for myself. And honestly, it wasn't even until I was 25 that I started to actually take initiative to learn things and think things through with this level of thoroughness and depth. The skills have to be fostered throughout many aspects of one's life. This is why the death of critical thinking is so multifaceted. People, particularly in this day and age, are generally meeting at least a few of the criteria for poor critical thinking skills. I know the death of critical thinking carries with it a pretty specific connotation of who is suffering from that death of critical thinking, which is why I wanted to use the example of the rural American archetype in this set of videos. This concept is most often used in the direction of the right wing and oftentimes in the direction of the far right wing, but I've never really seen it approached from a perspective of empathy. There are real, serious, very valid sociological reasons for why the right is the way they are and has the beliefs that they have. And I'm hoping that I'm able to shed some light on that and allow us to see the situation with some of that empathy, because it truly is not their fault in a lot of cases. Not all, but a lot. This is an issue all across spectrums and in all sorts of social groups. Again, look at the heat maps in the ChatGPT study that I brought up in the previous video. I have seen plenty of sensationalist half-truth stuff on the left wing that's meant to provoke the same sort of emotional response as stuff that goes out to the right wing. Even if something is trustworthy or has a high level of factuality, we should still be looking at it as, is this the whole truth? How concrete is this evidence? You can even read a peer-reviewed and published study and need to think critically about it. Was the sample size big enough? Was it randomized and controlled? Was it tracked and verified, or was it self-reported? That's the attitude we need to have to everything we see. We need to be fact-checking, doing our due diligence, and considering different perspectives before creating or sharing any kind of information on any given topic. But how do we do that? Fact-checking.
While yes, violently unsexy, fact-checking is in fact the fastest and the easiest thing that you can do to engage in your critical thinking skills and protect yourself from the dumbing. But do you actually know how to fact-check? As we learned in our second video, most people don't, despite thinking that they do. Meaning that someone saying that they believe that they see misinformation or they believe they are fact-checking doesn't necessarily mean that either of those things are true. Matter of fact, if you're so smart, why don't you leave a comment telling me how you fact-check? Because I'm sure it's better than mine. Seriously though, like actually leave a comment because I'd love to know better methods than mine if mine aren't as good as yours. I also raise you this question. Do you fact-check things you agree with? Gotcha. While 70% of people say that they verify what they see on social media, studies also show that people are just habitual sharers. You may fact check things that seem a little fishy, but you're also extremely likely to share things that you agree with because it aligns with your confirmation bias and lives in your echo chamber. If you watch the first 2 videos in this series, I bet you're real impressed with how it's all coming together, huh? Well then click the like button. Okay, enough fiddle farting. How exactly do we fact check? There's a number of good ways to do this, and it kind of depends on the situation for each thing. My first default method of fact checking is simply to Google it. Seriously. If I see anything out there trying to tell me something, my first step is to simply Google it, even if it aligns with my beliefs. Then, depending on what I see and where I see it from, I'll go to MediaBiasFactCheck.com. It's not uncommon to find articles from outlets that I've never seen before, so I like to go to this website to see if it's something I can trust or not. Typically, I prefer to get most of my news from Reuters because it's one of the most center and high factuality mainstream media outlets out there. But what happens if you come across an article written by some random guy on Substack or Medium? Very simple, look them up too. Yep, Google it. For instance, that long study I brought up in
the last video
about the environmental impacts of AI, you may have come across this insanely long and very robust study by Andy Masley. I've been doing a lot of research to figure out whether or not there was actually cause for concern around the whole AI and environment thing, and I had a hard time finding any kind of terribly conclusive stuff. Typically, I'll avoid Substack and Medium posts because, you know, might as well be Twitter. But this time I decided to give it a shot. I went to the author's profile, saw that he worked for Effective Altruism DC, looked into what they've done and what they stand for, and came to the conclusion that the guy knew what he was talking about and read the study. And also the study had a lot of sources. Another very simple way to fact check is with factcheck.org. Crazy, I know. Factcheck.org is exactly what it sounds like. They aggregate news for you, tell you if it's true or not, or if it's missing some vital information. The downside of this website, in my opinion, is that it's a little bit harder to use. Because it presents itself similarly to a news outlet, it's a little harder to search and find things specifically that you're looking for. It does have a search feature, but it's still a little clunky, and I have found it to be unreliable. Some other fact-checking resources include Snopes, PolitiFact, MediaWise, and SciCheck. Fact-checking really is the backbone for all of the other methods for increasing your critical thinking. It's gonna come back a lot in the rest of these methods. For instance, when we talk about verifying the quality of your information. But Austin, that sounds just like fact-checking. Have you been listening to me? Yes, it is an arm of fact-checking, but it's an important one. Remember how in the second video in this series, I brought up a study from security.org, but I made a point to call out the margin of error within that study? I did that to employ critical thinking skills directly in front of your eyes. It would have been very easy for me to read that study, see confidently worded paragraphs and well-designed charts and just say, huh, looks legit, and moved on, but instead I approached it with skepticism. While on the surface everything seemed good, I noticed right away that there were a number of red flags in this study. Those flags were as follows. There was no explanation of the criteria a person had to fit to qualify to be part of that study. The questions in the survey were pretty general and usually lacked nuance. There was no identifiable attempt to verify any of the data that they got, and there was no indication of a replicated study. You see, the gold standard of studies are as follows. Randomized controlled trial, repeated at least once with similar results, highly specific in the criteria that the participants must meet, and it considers both supporting and denying evidence of the reason for the study. Basically what this means is a group of participants is chosen at random according to a set of criteria and then studied in some way based to the purpose of the study. Then there's a control group that meets a different set of much more broad and loose or opposite criteria to ensure differences in results. This gives us the most accurate representation of the findings. So in the case of this security.org study, it would have been best if we knew how many people were in each party that was represented, where those people chose to do their fact checking, the rationale that they follow for the media that they trust and believe to be factual, where the study was conducted so we know what kind of social bias may be at play, and if the results could be repeated with a new set of people or not. Like I mentioned in the second episode of this series, people may say that they fact check, but this study showed absolutely no attempt to verify as to whether or not they were fact checking at like good trusted sources to fact check with. This disparity is represented directly when we see that Republicans, a majority of them, said that they don't trust mainstream media, but that their number one trusted media sources were Fox News and One America. The same is seen with Democrats favoring Time as their most trusted news outlet. While yes, it is high factuality reporting, it leans pretty far to the left considering all of the other options on their list. So how can this study represent whether people are actually fact-checking if they trust heavily biased and low factuality sources? These people aren't fact-checking, they're reinforcing their biases. The same principle can be taken to even the most respected of medical journals. Sometimes you'll see a really convincing trial on a highly respected journal, but then you'll find out that the sample size was only 61 people or that it was never replicated again. Does that make it wrong? No, but it does mean you should be looking at it with an eye of skepticism. Incomplete trials, particularly social surveys like the ones that I mentioned, are a little bit safer to draw conclusions from or at least gain inferences from, but they should still be met with scrutiny, especially if there's very noticeable inconsistencies within them or a very clear limit, like how all of the teachers in the one study were from the same school. Of course, none of this matters if you aren't willing to practice open-mindedness. In episode 2, we talked about cognitive bias and identity preservation. In short, cognitive biases are things within our minds that keep us within our belief systems, and identity preservation is a system in our minds, along with those cognitive biases, that preserves our identities. This is hardwiring in our brains that protects itself from any kind of threats it perceives by stubbornly disagreeing with or choosing not to believe new information. When you're confronted with something that you've thought to be true your entire life, depending on how close that thing is to your identity, and then you find out that it's not true or you're presented with information that counters your belief, you may get frustrated or angry or be completely unwilling to listen to what the person has to say or take in the new information. Even if it's right, the psychology of all of this is where we really start to see ourselves and our own cognitive biases come into play in this crisis that a lot of us might not think that we're part of. The way around this is by consciously practicing open-mindedness, and that can be done in a number of ways. For one, active listening. You ever see a reel or a TikTok from someone that you absolutely just vehemently disagree with and it makes your blood boil? Well, if you want to cultivate some open-mindedness, maybe try listening to what that person has to say. It may still make you irrationally angry and completely ruin your day, but if you can look at it and think, why might they feel this way? You might find yourself a little more understanding of their viewpoints. Does it make them right? No, not necessarily. But being able to see their opinions from a more empathetic point of view will allow you to open your mind to other beliefs. At the least, it can help you see them with a little less red in your vision. 2, question everything. This necessitates that you are good at actively listening, otherwise you're just going to want to send your head into a concrete wall. It's pretty simple though, and again, it fits right in with fact-checking and verifying your sources. Try to get in the habit of asking questions about things, even innocuous things. Why does he believe that? How did he come up with that belief? What are the details of that belief? Are there any truths to that belief? Dig deep. Ask as much as you can and actively listen to the answer. Resist the urge to argue and just listen. You can start to build this habit by maybe journaling every night and asking yourself a question about something that's on your mind. It can be a small thing, but just get in the habit of every day asking a question about something you're thinking about. Or maybe you set a reminder in your phone that tells you to ask a question or internally question whatever you're thinking in that given moment, the situation that you're in. Train yourself to ask questions and seek answers. 3, fight your biases. Easier said than done, I know. But like I mentioned a second ago, resisting the urge to argue and fight will help you become a little bit more open-minded and challenge those biases. Honestly, one of the best ways to start cultivating this and fighting against your biases is just to look up what all of the cognitive biases are and like read about that. Awareness alone is enough to help you kind of start to think like, oh shit, I see myself in this one. Then having that awareness will kind of allow you to notice when you're doing it and say, no, not right now. Again, questioning everything and fact checking is also a really good way to start fighting your biases. It'll kind of start happening automatically once you get yourself into that habit. And number 4, meditate. I know, you don't come to my videos for cliches, but Can't help it, I'm a sucker for science. It's true. A regular mindfulness meditation practice can absolutely be one of the biggest contributors to cultivating an open mind. This is because, in short, it trains you to be aware of your thought patterns. And like I said in the previous point, that awareness allows you to take a second to actually question and then listen to these thoughts. It also primes you to let go of old thoughts and beliefs that don't serve you. This is because the nature of mindfulness meditation is to let thoughts come in and then learn how to let them go. Even a short practice of 10 or 5 minutes a day can be enough to kind of kickstart what it takes to cultivate that open mind. Even a short 10 minutes a day practice of mindfulness meditation is enough to make a pretty significant impact. There's like a million guided meditation apps and YouTube videos. It's just a matter of starting and picking up the consistency. Cultivating a more open mind not only allows you to take a step back and listen to other people and have some empathy, but it also helps you find out if you've been leading yourself astray. We all think our beliefs are the right ones, and I know at least one of you is planning on sending this video to someone you know who you want to have change their opinions to your opinions. Gotcha, again. If that's you, that's a strong marker that you also need to try opening your mind and seeking out other perspectives. Try to prove yourself wrong about something. Make proving yourself wrong, or verifying that you're right, a habit anytime you see something that triggers that feel-good superiority feeling for being right, with fact-checking and source verification. But of course, all of these tips and tricks are kind of medical and sterile and boring, and we all deserve some treats here and there. Which is why for my final point, I want to tell you my favorite method of improving critical thinking skills.
Strategy games. It wouldn't be one of my videos if I didn't bring up my life-ruining obsession with Baldur's Gate 3 at least once.
Come, mortals, and try your luck.
It's pretty well documented that playing strategy games can help you increase your critical thinking skills because of the whole strategy thing. To develop an effective strategy, you first have to consider all possible outcomes, all possible options, and decide which one is best for you to meet the goal that you're going for. This is not unlike what we need to do to avoid the dumbing. Consider other options or perspectives, figure out which one makes the most sense, and go forward with that one. There was a study released in 2023 by a team of researchers that I'm not going to read all the names of that looked into how we can improve our critical thinking through gamification. In this study, the method that they chose was real strategy games, which is basically a game that you play for the sake of learning rather than for entertainment, but they kind of chopped it up and made it their own thing that also had the entertainment factor. The researchers developed a tabletop RPG, not unlike Dungeons and Dragons, but instead it was placed in current times during the pandemic with, some of the modern sciences going on to inform the lore. What they found was that because the issues at hand were presented in a game form, the hypothetical no-stakes format presentation of it made people a lot more willing to consider other options and look at other outcomes that they wouldn't normally think about. The behaviors that these people picked up during this game also extended into their personal lives. The participants showed an improvement in reasoning and critical thinking after an evaluation. The even better news is we're not even relegated to this specific game from this study. This can be done through almost any strategy game. Another study observed how video games enhanced a manager's strategic and cognitive abilities and saw that the idea of needing to figure out how to reduce taking damage and remember techniques actually applied to these parts of their lives and their thinking structures. I personally, like I just said, am obsessed with Baldur's Gate 3. I've put in far too many hours to it, and Baldur's Gate 3 is essentially just Dungeons and Dragons in video game. The game offers unparalleled flexibility and player freedom. You can make incredible choices. The lore goes really deep. Everything is super intricate and crazy, and I could gush about this game for hours, but that's a different video. Anyways, there's a tremendous amount of strategy involved in that game, and if you want specific outcomes to happen, you have to figure out what you have to do to get there. While it may not feel like I'm developing critical thinking skills while I'm playing this game, I am absolutely using so many of the facets of that in order to achieve my goals within the game. I'm not prescribing that you go play Baldur's Gate 3 right now, although I think you should. It's an incredible game and I love it so much. But I am telling you that strategy games, even things like Settlers of Catan or Risk, are really, really good at improving your critical thinking skills and making it so that it doesn't feel like that's what you're doing. I love looking at my life as it's a video game, and I like that seeing these things like fact checking and study reading and verifying sources can help me pass my skill checks later on. And it really helps me keep that questioning and open attitude all the time.
All of these things are important for you to develop critical thinking skills and stay out of reach of the dumbing. The best part of all of this is that all we have to do to start practicing these skills and help other people practice these skills is to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just kidding, sort of. All we really have to do is lead by example. Don't worry about changing the minds of everyone you know or being a martyr for intelligence. Arguing with strangers on the internet will never work, regardless of how much it feels good and emboldens your confirmation bias. Instead, just work on improving your own skills. And when someone you love shows that they're starting to fall victim to some sort of misinformation or isn't thinking critically, don't accost them or try to sway them. Ask them why they believe the thing that they believe or think the thing they think. Bring the conversation to consider all the angles. Listen to them and continue questioning. Don't do it in a gotcha way. Just be genuinely curious and show that you're open-minded to their perspective. Say your friend brings up some totally not true statistic and you're totally appalled by it. All you have to do is look it up on your phone in front of them, read a few articles really quickly, and fact check it, bias check it, and verify that they're good sources. The reason you do this tactfully and only with your closest friends and family is because they most likely are the ones that are going to trust you and be the least offensive when you try to challenge it a little, especially if you do it in front of them and let them watch what you're doing. As we encourage others to do their own research and lead by example, they're more likely to start doing it in their own lives and then showing it to other people in their lives, even just casually. I cannot stress to you how fast of a process this is. You hear something, you Google it, you skim 2 or 3 articles, you look it up on Media Bias Fact Check. If the sources are all high factuality, you can trust it. The end. I think a lot of people think that working to fact check or go against their biases is a lot of work, but really all you gotta do is like play a strategy game every once in a while and have the fact checking websites queued up on your phone's browser tabs and just get in the habit of popping stuff in those really quick. It only takes a couple seconds and it's a very simple automatic thing that you can work on. We are reaching a very serious moment, particularly in the United States, where misinformation is rampant and people are more divided and full of hate for each other than ever. In order to redirect our anger and take back the lives that are rightfully ours, we need to be able to arm ourselves and our fellow person with facts and knowledge and understanding and critical thinking skills. Between systemic failures in education, social conditioning, the hardwiring of the human brain, echo chambers on the internet, journalism and media being dead, misinformation being everywhere we look, it's no surprise and no wonder that these critical thinking skills are as dead as the Latin language. But as we've just discussed, not all hope is lost, and there are still things that we can do to protect ourselves and our loved ones from the dumbing. It'll take time and effort, but I genuinely believe that we can get back to a place where critical thinking is in vogue. If you watched this entire series, I want to extend the most heartfelt thank you to you. It means so much that you took your time to watch through all of these, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I am sure that there's at least a handful of you in the comments right now typing away, telling me that I've missed a bunch of stuff that would contribute to the critical thinking crisis. So before you get mad at me, I'm going to address some of those right now. For one, I know I didn't really talk about AI in the context of what it's doing to the critical thinking crisis. I know there's concerns about ChatGPT being used not super well and generative AI causing misinformation stuff, but I chose not to talk about it because I feel like it's so new with only the last few years to really look back on. And this issue has been around since before AI. AI is definitely exacerbating it. There's no question about that. But I wanted to keep it to things that are and have been relevant for a long time. Because again, this is a thing that started a while ago. Essentially, I think the way I look at that is that we have been primed through all of the stuff I've talked about over the last 4 videos for AI to be as problematic as it likely will be. And I will probably circle back on this in another video down the road. 2, I wanted to keep this as like neutral and fact-based as possible, so I didn't go into theories about how the ignorance and lack of critical thinking is manufactured and intentional. I know that there is historical context where that has absolutely been done, and the government has controlled what people are able to see for their own gain and agenda movement. But again, there's not enough hard data in the current climate to verify whether or not that's what's actually happening. So I wanted to keep it as factual and neutral as possible. 3, a ton of the research on the decline of critical thinking happened post-pandemic. It's like a kind of an alarming amount, actually. I chose not to really bring that up too much or go into that too deep because I just didn't really think it was that relevant. But if you're curious, yes, the pandemic absolutely caused a nosedive in critical thinking skills across the planet. Primarily in the Western world, and there's a lot of verification for that too. And it's interesting that we got so much research post-pandemic because of everything that happened there. But again, I just felt like this has been happening for so long, and we were primed for that to get worse because of the systems that had been in place for decades. So I didn't think that detail was terribly important. And finally, if you think it's tone deaf of me to say that I'm taking a neutral and nonpartisan stance, but then used a rural American Republican family as my example in the story, congratulations, you missed the point. I wanted to use that as an example, first off, because
using more of an inner city example bleeds the line into racism, and I didn't want to go there. And that's like a really hard thing to speak about tactfully. And the other reason is because I think we need to see people that we don't agree with a little bit more empathy and humanity. Again, like I've tried to push this entire time, a lot of these belief systems are not these people's fault. They are because of the structure set in place that they have fallen into. And I think seeing that with empathy, while we might not agree, is really, really important, because we can't do anything if we're just arguing with each other all the time. If we can empathize with the people that we don't agree with, then we might actually stand a chance in making the difference that we talked about in this video. We've got enough division in the world, and what we really need is like a collective understanding and to redirect our anger in the places that it should actually be put. The more we consistently scream into the void about how everyone has worms for brains and they're doing stupid shit and sharing stupid things and dividing each other further and further, the worse we make this crisis and the worse the world gets. Now, to put on my actual partisan hat briefly, none of this should surprise you. The people at the top are extorting you. They're feasting on your bones and drinking your blood. Interest rates are unbelievably high. Everything costs a fortune. You can't buy a goddamn house anymore, and there's plastic in your food. But instead of screaming at the corpses in Senate, we're screaming at each other for the shit that those corpses have caused themselves. Our anger is misdirected, and the people at the top want it that way. It is up to us to arm ourselves with knowledge and truth, real truth, so that we can start to fight back and take back the life that we were promised when we were kids. The more we blindly follow our own echo chambers, the more they can get away with ruining things for the rest of us at their own personal gain. Okay, anyways, back to the neutrality. Once again, I want to thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this series or just this video or whatever, please do me a favor and like the video and leave a comment and let me know your thoughts. I'm really curious. I'd love to have a conversation about this. And if you want to see more videos like this, maybe more series, maybe you had an idea for a video you want to suggest to me, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, click the little bell so that you know when I'm going to upload the next time, and I'm forgetting what to say, shit. I am trying to build an intentional community of people that are introspective and care about empathy and all of the other things that seem to be missing a little bit in today's world. So if that's you, come along, join the community, let's have some fun, let's learn some stuff, let's make each other feel better. That all said, again, thank you so much for the third time, and I will see you next week.